There comes a moment in life when the weight of pleasing others becomes unbearable. For years you may live under the quiet rule of expectations. Parents want one thing. Teachers demand another. Friends pull you in different directions. Society whispers endlessly about success, respect, and the image you are supposed to project. And slowly, almost without noticing, you begin to disappear beneath it all. Carl Jung understood this disappearance as one of the greatest dangers to the human soul. He wrote that the most tragic fate is not failure or rejection but the slow erosion of the self until you are no longer living your own life at all. You become a mask. In public you smile. You achieve. You play roles that others celebrate. Yet deep inside you sense the truth. The person you were meant to be lies hidden, neglected, waiting. Choosing yourself is not the same as selfishness. It is not an act of arrogance. It is the opposite. It is the courage to honor what Jung called individuation, the long and often painful process of becoming who you truly are. For Jung, every person carries within them a seed of unique potential. But that seed does not grow on its own. It requires attention. It requires the decision to turn away from the noise of the crowd and listen instead to the quiet voice inside. This is why the moment you finally choose yourself feels both terrifying and liberating. It is terrifying because it means letting go of approval. The applause of others cannot guide you anymore. You must risk their misunderstanding, their criticism, even their distance. It is liberating because for the first time you step into the sunlight of your own truth. The shadow of imitation fades, and you begin to breathe as yourself. Jung often warned that neglecting the self leads to bitterness. When you betray your inner life for too long, you grow restless and resentful. You may project that anger outward, blaming others for your unhappiness. Or you may turn it inward, collapsing into depression or numbness. Either way, life begins to feel hollow. The outer achievements that once gave you pride lose their meaning. Wealth, recognition, even relationships seem strangely empty when they are built on the abandonment of your own path. To choose yourself is to interrupt this cycle. It is to say no to the patterns that suffocate your spirit. You begin to notice when you are acting only for validation. You sense when you are speaking words that do not belong to you. Slowly, carefully, you remove the layers of performance. What remains is something fragile yet undeniable. It is the essence of you. This choice often begins in silence. A restless night when you lie awake staring at the ceiling. A moment of exhaustion when you realize you cannot keep living this way. A sudden recognition, maybe while walking alone, that you are not truly alive in the life you have built. Jung believed these moments were not accidents. They are signals from the unconscious, knocking on the door of awareness, urging you to reclaim what has been lost. At first, the act of choosing yourself can look small. You say no to a demand that once controlled you. You express an opinion you used to hide. You allow yourself a dream you once buried. Yet with each step, the old mask begins to crack. The false self weakens. And behind it, the original self begins to breathe. It is not an easy journey. To choose yourself is to confront the parts of your life that no longer belong to you. Careers built on expectation. Friendships maintained out of fear. Even the roles within family that feel like cages. Jung taught that growth requires sacrifice. What is false must be allowed to fall away, even when it hurts. But what rises in its place is something no one can give you and no one can take away. It is the power of living your own life, fully and without apology. That is why this turning point matters so deeply. It is not just about freedom. It is about wholeness. Until you choose yourself, you are divided. One part of you obeys the world. Another part suffers in silence. But when you choose yourself, those parts begin to unite. The inner life and the outer life start to move together. You are no longer split between what you feel and what you do. You become one. And in that unity lies a quiet strength. You may still face obstacles. You may still endure loss and rejection. But these no longer feel like threats to your existence. They become challenges that refine you. Because when you are rooted in your own truth, nothing outside can destroy you. This is only the beginning of what Jung meant by choosing yourself. It is the threshold, the first step into a new kind of life where the soul is no longer hidden in shadow. It is the moment when you stop betraying your own heart and begin, at last, to live from it. The moment you step across that threshold, when you finally choose yourself, life begins to rearrange itself around you. Not instantly, not without pain, but in ways that reveal both the cost and the beauty of individuation. Jung often described the process as a confrontation with the shadow, the hidden parts of yourself that you have denied or buried for the sake of acceptance. To honor your true self is to turn toward those shadows and bring them into the light. At first, the shadow can be frightening. It holds the anger you suppressed, the desires you silenced, the grief you never allowed yourself to feel. Choosing yourself means you can no longer pretend those parts do not exist. They rise to the surface, demanding recognition. This is why the early stages of individuation are often marked by turbulence. Relationships strain. Old certainties collapse. You may feel lost, as if you are dismantling the very structure of your life. Yet Jung taught that this dismantling is necessary. Only by facing the shadow can you integrate it, and only through integration can you discover the full depth of your being. As this process unfolds, the false roles you once played begin to dissolve. Perhaps you were the perfect child, the reliable worker, the loyal friend who always gave more than they received. These roles brought you approval but also chains. Choosing yourself does not mean rejecting kindness or responsibility, but it does mean refusing to be defined entirely by what others expect of you. In letting go of those roles, you create space for something more authentic to emerge. That authenticity is not always gentle. Sometimes it comes with sharp edges. You may find yourself speaking truths that unsettle people. You may make decisions that others call reckless. But within those choices lies a deeper honesty. You are no longer tailoring your life to please an audience. You are beginning to live as the person you were always meant to be. And while this can invite conflict, it also attracts a different kind of connection, relationships grounded not in performance but in recognition of the real self. Jung believed that the psyche is always striving for balance. When you deny who you are, the psyche rebels. It pushes back through anxiety, through depression, through sudden crises that shatter the illusion of control. Many people mistake these crises as disasters. Jung saw them as opportunities. They are the soul's way of demanding that you stop betraying yourself. When you finally heed that demand, you discover that what once appeared as breakdown is in fact breakthrough. To choose yourself also means embracing solitude. This does not mean permanent isolation, but it does mean learning to stand alone without fear. Jung warned that people often flee into crowds, into noise and distraction, because they are afraid of meeting themselves in silence. Yet it is in that silence that the self begins to speak. When you choose yourself, you no longer run from solitude. You accept it as the ground where your individuality takes root. And in solitude, something remarkable happens. The world, once blurred by the endless demands of others, sharpens into clarity. You begin to notice what truly nourishes you. The books that stir your mind. The places that calm your spirit. The work that does not drain but awakens you. Slowly your life shifts. What once felt obligatory now feels optional. What once seemed impossible begins to feel necessary. This is the quiet reordering of existence that comes when you honor your inner life. Yet even as you build this new life, the old world does not vanish. People may resist your transformation. They may accuse you of changing, of becoming distant or difficult. And in a way, they are right. You are changing. You are no longer willing to live as an echo of other people's expectations. Jung would remind us that this friction is not a sign of failure but of progress. The resistance of others is often the measure of your authenticity. Choosing yourself, then, is not a single act but a continual commitment. It is the willingness to face discomfort, to endure misunderstanding, and to remain loyal to the truth of your own soul. The path is demanding, yet the reward is profound. Because when you begin to live this way, you no longer chase life from the outside. You carry it within you. The source of meaning is no longer dependent on applause or permission. It flows from the depths of who you are. And with this, a quiet transformation begins. The world may still be chaotic, but you are no longer uprooted by every storm. The voice of fear grows softer. The pull of conformity weakens. You find yourself walking with a steadier step, guided not by the shifting winds of opinion but by the compass of your own truth. This is the power of individuation. It does not remove struggle, but it makes struggle meaningful. This is the stage where life stops feeling like a performance and starts to feel like a journey. Not a journey toward perfection, but toward wholeness. Every choice to honor yourself deepens that journey, and with each step you discover more of the vast, untapped potential that has been waiting inside you all along. When the process of individuation takes hold, the meaning of strength itself begins to change. In the past, strength may have looked like endurance, the ability to bear expectations, to smile while carrying burdens that were never yours. But once you choose yourself, strength is no longer about carrying the weight of other people's lives. It becomes the ability to live with honesty, even when that honesty costs you comfort. Carl Jung often spoke of the archetypes that live within us, ancient patterns of human experience that shape our inner world. Before choosing yourself, you may live almost entirely within one archetype, perhaps the obedient child, the caretaker, the achiever. These roles bring a sense of order but also a sense of limitation. When individuation begins, new archetypes rise. The rebel, the wanderer, the seeker of truth. This is not about rejecting who you were, but about realizing you are far more than the single mask you once wore. At first, this expansion can feel disorienting. If you have always been the reliable one, what does it mean to admit you also long for freedom? If you have always been the quiet one, what does it mean to discover a voice inside that demands to be heard? To choose yourself is to allow these hidden dimensions to come alive, and to integrate them rather than push them back into silence. Integration is the key. Jung warned that without integration, the newly discovered parts of the self can overwhelm you. A sudden eruption of anger may burn bridges. A flood of desire may lead to chaos. But with patience, these forces can be harnessed, not as enemies but as allies. Anger becomes the strength to set boundaries. Desire becomes the spark of creativity. Even grief, once unbearable, becomes a well of depth and compassion. Through this integration, the self grows more whole. You begin to sense an inner coherence, as if the scattered pieces of your life are slowly aligning. You no longer feel torn between the outer image and the inner truth. You are learning to carry both. The public face may still exist, but now it is transparent, no longer a disguise but a reflection of the real person within. This wholeness transforms the way you encounter the world. Instead of approaching life defensively, always worried about judgment, you begin to meet it with openness. Choices feel lighter because they come from alignment rather than fear. Failures no longer crush you, because they do not define you. Success no longer enslaves you, because it does not control your worth. In both triumph and loss, you remain connected to something deeper, something untouchable. Jung often used the image of the journey into the depths, the descent into the unconscious where treasures lie hidden beneath fear. To choose yourself is to walk into those depths willingly, to face the monsters of doubt, and emerge with the gold of self-knowledge. Many avoid this descent because it threatens the comfortable illusions of life. Yet those illusions eventually crumble on their own. The one who chooses themselves does not wait for collapse. They take the journey with courage, trusting that what they bring back will make them whole. Over time, this path shapes you into a presence that others can feel. Not because you are louder or more dominant, but because you are real. In a world filled with masks, authenticity carries a quiet power. People sense it in the way you speak, the way you act, the way you stand firm without needing to prove yourself. Some will be drawn to it, finding in you a mirror of their own hidden longing. Others will resist it, unsettled by the reminder that they too are wearing masks. But either way, you are no longer living for their reactions. You are simply being. This being is not passive. It is active, creative, alive. To choose yourself is to reclaim the energy that was once wasted on pleasing and pretending, and to direct it toward the work that matters to you. Art, writing, teaching, building, healing, whatever form it takes, it flows more freely now, because it arises from your essence rather than obligation. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation as not only a personal journey but a gift to the collective. A person who has become whole radiates wholeness outward, offering others a glimpse of what is possible. And so the journey deepens. The more you honor yourself, the more you realize that choosing yourself is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. A constant realignment. Sometimes you will slip back into old patterns, wearing the mask out of habit. But now you notice it sooner. You feel the discomfort of betrayal more sharply. And each time, you return to yourself with greater resolve. This constancy builds a foundation of inner freedom. Life will still bring uncertainty. It will still bring loss. But these no longer feel like threats to your existence. They become part of the fabric of your story, challenges that shape rather than shatter you. To live in this way is to walk with a dignity that cannot be borrowed and cannot be taken away. As the journey deepens, something unexpected begins to reveal itself. Choosing yourself, which at first seemed like an act of separation, gradually becomes a bridge. You step away from the demands of others not to abandon connection, but to transform it. Jung believed that when the individual becomes whole, their relationships shift from dependency and performance to authenticity and depth. In other words, by becoming true to yourself, you create the possibility of being truly known by another. At first, this may not feel like harmony. Some bonds fall apart. People who are comfortable with the mask may not accept the person behind it. They may cling to the version of you that made them feel safe or powerful. To hold your ground in these moments requires immense courage. Yet Jung would say it is better to be rejected for your truth than loved for your disguise. For only when you live as yourself can you discover the kind of relationships that nourish rather than drain. What follows is a new form of love, one not based on illusion but on recognition. When you are rooted in your own truth, you no longer seek another person to complete you, to fill the void of a silenced self. Instead, you meet them as a whole being. Love becomes not a contract of dependency but a dance between two individuated souls. It is less about possession and more about presence. And this applies not only to romantic love, but to friendship, family, even the way you relate to the world itself. With this wholeness comes a quieter compassion. You begin to see that most people are not malicious when they pressure others to conform. They too are trapped in masks, repeating the patterns society handed them. Choosing yourself does not harden you against them. It softens you. You recognize the struggle in their eyes, the unspoken longing to live freely. You may not be able to rescue them. Individuation is a path each must walk alone. But by living your truth, you become a kind of living reminder that freedom is possible. Jung often spoke of symbols as carriers of the unconscious. In dreams, in art, in sudden images that rise unbidden to the mind, the soul speaks in symbols. As you choose yourself, these symbols grow stronger. You may find yourself drawn to certain images, places, or patterns that feel strangely alive. These are not coincidences. They are the language of the deep self, guiding you toward greater wholeness. Listening to them, honoring them, allows you to walk in harmony with parts of yourself that reason alone cannot reach. And through this symbolic life, a sense of meaning begins to grow. Not the superficial meaning of achievements or accolades, but a deeper resonance. You begin to see your life as part of a larger unfolding. Jung called this the path of individuation, but it is also the path of destiny. To choose yourself is not to isolate your existence from the world. It is to recognize that your unique wholeness has a place in the fabric of reality, a role only you can fulfill. This is why Jung insisted that individuation is both deeply personal and profoundly collective. A person who becomes whole does not retreat into selfishness. They contribute to life in a way that only an authentic self can. Their creativity, their compassion, their presence, these ripple outward, touching others in ways they may never even realize. In this way, choosing yourself becomes not just an act of survival, but an offering to the world. And yet, this stage of the journey requires humility. It is easy to mistake authenticity for superiority, to believe that in shedding the mask you have risen above others. But Jung warned against this temptation. True individuation is not about ego inflation. It is about balance, about holding both light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, individuality, and connection. To choose yourself is not to proclaim yourself above the crowd, but to walk among others with integrity, knowing who you are without needing to diminish who they are. What emerges from this humility is a kind of grounded peace. The storms of life do not vanish, but they lose their power to define you. Relationships may come and go. Success may rise and fall. Yet beneath it all there is a center that remains intact, a center that belongs only to you. And from that center, you can meet the world with openness rather than fear. This is the gift of choosing yourself. Not only freedom, not only wholeness, but the ability to live with presence. To be here, fully, without the constant pull of masks or the weight of expectations. And in that presence, life begins to reveal itself not as something to endure, but as something to be lived deeply. By the time you reach this stage, the journey of choosing yourself no longer feels like a rebellion. In the beginning it was resistance, the breaking of chains, the painful refusal to live as a mask. Now it has become something quieter, something steady, like the rhythm of your own breath. Individuation is no longer a distant goal. It is the life you are living moment by moment. Carl Jung often wrote that the goal of human development is not perfection but wholeness. Perfection belongs to the surface, to the outer image that seeks applause. Wholeness belongs to the depths, where contradictions live side by side. To be whole is to carry both your light and your shadow without shame. It is to accept the griefs that shaped you as much as the joys that uplifted you. It is to walk through the world not as an idealized figure, but as a human being who has embraced the fullness of their own existence. This acceptance brings with it a rare form of peace. You no longer waste energy fighting against yourself. The battles of denial and suppression fall silent. What once felt fragmented becomes one. And in that unity, you discover a strength that cannot be shaken, because it is not built on illusion. It is built on the truth of who you are. Such a life is not without sorrow. To choose yourself does not erase suffering. Illness still comes. Loss still wounds. The unpredictability of existence still unsettles. But these experiences no longer strip you of meaning. Instead, they deepen you. The very act of facing suffering with authenticity transforms it into wisdom. Pain that once threatened to break you becomes the ground from which compassion and resilience grow. As this transformation matures, you begin to notice that your presence itself carries weight. You do not need to speak loudly or demand attention. The depth within you speaks for itself. Others may not understand it fully, but they feel it. They sense a steadiness that comes only from living in truth. And in a world desperate for authenticity, that steadiness becomes a light. You do not need to force it outward. Simply by being, you illuminate. This illumination is not about glory. It is not about being remembered or celebrated. It is about alignment. To choose yourself is to align your inner life with your outer life so fully that they no longer contradict each other. You live what you are. And in that alignment lies a quiet joy, the joy of existing without disguise. Jung believed that when a person reaches this state, they contribute to the healing of the collective. Not by preaching or imposing, but by embodying. Wholeness in one person awakens the possibility of wholeness in others. Authenticity ripples outward. It touches those who are ready, planting seeds that may take years to grow. And so, your personal journey becomes part of something larger, the slow, unseen work of human transformation. To choose yourself, then, is not to turn away from the world. It is to return to it differently. You engage not as a mask but as a being who has faced the shadow, embraced the contradictions, and emerged whole. This wholeness does not promise a perfect life, but it offers a real one. A life that is lived deeply, truthfully, and with an integrity that cannot be borrowed. And so the journey comes full circle. What began as the terrifying act of letting go of approval becomes the steady act of living as yourself. What began as loneliness becomes connection of a deeper kind. What began as struggle becomes meaning. To choose yourself above all else is not to abandon others. It is to discover that by living your own truth, you give the greatest gift you can, the presence of a life lived authentically, without apology, without disguise, without regret. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation. Not a theory, not an ideal, but the lived reality of a soul that has finally come home to itself.